Shalom, I'm Officer Jadiel of IUIC, and I'm here to let you Afro-Iraqis know that you are the Israelites. Islam is not your religion, and the culture you've been given has been forced upon you over many generations. When you look at Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, it explains what will happen to the Israelites and how they will be spread across the earth. The issues you face in your community of poverty, of oppression, of not being represented in government are all documented in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Today we're going to look at that. And we're going to show you that this Bible is your book and you must come back to keeping God's laws, statutes, and commandments. Before we start, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 4. And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies, and the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. The Afro-Iraqis have kindled a fire in God's anger because they are not keeping God's laws. They have lost their heritage today. And everything that they believe to be their heritage has been forced upon them or pushed upon them by Arabs, by the people who have conquered you and enslaved you over time. But we're here to erase those lies and tell you the truth of who you are according to the Bible. We're going to jump over now and we're going to read Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. And let's see how the Afro-Iraqis ended up in Africa. What happened because Christ prophesied of you all fleeing into the mountains. It's the book of Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. The Israelites scattered deeper into Africa during 70 AD, when they were conquered. Christ said flee into the mountains, and that refers to deeper into Africa. So the Afro-Iraqis are individuals, the Israelites, who scattered when they were conquered in 70 AD. And what happened after that? You all were scattered, and then this happened. Psalms chapter 106 and verse 35. Let's read that. And it says, but were mingled among the heathen and learned their works. Verse 36, and they served their idols, which were a snare unto them. So when you all were scattered, you started to worship idols, not the God of the Bible. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28 now, and let's see. What did God say would happen if you serve those idols? Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 15. Let's read it. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. God said if you did not keep his commandments, if you broke them, that you would be cursed. And one of those curses was Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 29. We're going to read that now. It says, and thou shalt grope at noondays as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Let's go over to this article now. Afro-Iraqi rituals, stigma, discrimination, and resilience. It says Afro-Iraqi people make up 5% of the Iraqi population, 42 million. And Iraq has been their home since the 9th century, mostly as part of the forced immigration due to the slave trade. Throughout their history, Afro-Iraqis have been subjected to oppression, racism, and discrimination. So if you look at the history of the Afro-Iraqis, it is plagued with these things, with discrimination, with racism, with lack of representation through our government, with poverty. God said you would only be oppressed and spoiled evermore. Discrimination and racism against Afro-Iraqis in particular and Afro-Arabs is, in general, are unfortunately rooted in Arab culture and are informed by a long history of negative representation. Iraqi society looks down upon Afro-Iraqis and portrays them and their rituals with appropriate stereotypes. So the Afro-Iraqis are constantly oppressed. Now we're going to look at this article, Living in the Shadows, the Enduring Marginalization of Black Iraqis. God said in the verse that we read in verse 29 that no man would save you. So let's read this. It says, emerging leaders within the Black Iraqi community have been harassed and even killed by fellow Iraqis for their political activism. In 2013, Jalal Diab, the Black Iraqi founder of Ansar al-Huraya, Movement of the Free Iraqis, was assassinated after his organization supported 2 Black Iraqi candidates for provincial election. One of whom was also targeted for assassination. So what it tells you is that no man will ever be able to rise up, because when they do, they are killed by the people who claim that they are their brothers. If you all worship Islam, why are you being murdered? Why are you being killed when you try to stand up for the rights of your people? It's because God said no man will be able to rise up and save you. Now let's jump over to Deuteronomy chapter 28, and we're going to read verse 64. And it says, "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." But how did you all get scattered? Let's read that. So this is Wikipedia, Afro-Iraqis. Afro-Iraqis are Iraq people of African Zanj heritage. Historically, their population has concentrated in the southern port city of Basra, as Basra was the capital of the slave trade in Iraq. Afro-Iraqis speak Arabic and mostly adhere to Islam. Alright, now we're going to jump over. Let's see what Zanj referred to. It says here, Zanj was situated in the Southeast Africa vicinity and was inhabited by Bantu-speaking peoples called the Zanj. That's important. Remember that word Bantu. Let's jump down and see what they were doing there. And it says that many Zanj were taken as slaves and were often used in strenuous agricultural work. In particular, Zanj slaves were used in labor-intensive plantations, harvesting crops such as sugarcane in the lower Mesopotamia basin of what is now southern Iraq. So the people of Basra were brought there for sugarcane slavery. There's also history that shows you that they were brought there for salt slavery as well. So now we're going to go to the Black Holocaust for Beginners. Let's read that. In this book, it tells you more about that word Zanj. The term Zanj or Zanji and Azaniah originally were Arabic words meaning African. Initially, it meant non-Ethiopian Africans and land of the black slave. So it was telling you when they used that word Zanj, it was derogatory, referring to the Afro-Iraqis as slaves. Let's jump over now to the Columbia World History, because we also read the word Bantu. What does that word Bantu mean? Let's read the first sentence here on page 299. It says, to begin with, the Negroes, or Bantu, as they are known in the East and South, had to confine themselves to the drier regions where the cereals they took with them on their migrations or found already in cultivation could grow. Now the important part there says the Negroes or Bantus. So the Bantus and the Negroes are the same people, the Israelites of the Bible. Right, we're going to read from Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph R. Windsor. And we're going to start on page 49. Let's see what it said about Muhammad. In order to win the pagans into the church, Christianity adopted many barbaric customs and traditions. Likewise, Muhammad, to gain the loyalty of the pagan Arabs, adopted many of their beloved customs. The Kaaba stone, an idol. Remember what the Bible said, that the Afro-Iraqis or the Israelites would go off into idolatry, was to receive high regard in their new religion. Also, the pagan temple at Mecca was to remain as a holy site. Let's keep reading. It says, the fanatical stage of most revolution is a bestial, ruthless, bloody, chaotic affair. The throats of men are cut from ear to ear. There is an absence of rationalization and extreme fanaticism sets in. So it was with Muhammad. He had come to a point of no return. He became a religious extremist in order to give his people a better life on a rapid scale. Muhammad came to the conclusion that all means of persuasion had been exhausted. The period of patience was past, and he was now determined to propagate his religion by the sword. So many of you all think you're in Islam because it's what you grew up with, because it's your culture. But your people were forced into it. When you were taken by the Arabs into slavery, they pushed Islam on you. Let's jump back to the Black Holocaust and let's see to what extent it went. Europe, for all its arrogance, was one of the last places on earth to be civilized. From 640 AD on, Muhammad's army of Islam unified the peoples of the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, and much of Africa. Although the peoples of Arabia and the Middle East were sometimes unified by force, that was nothing compared to what befell the people of Africa, the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade lasted from 652 AD, Arab-Nubian slave treaty, until 1890. It didn't truly end until 1911. So the Arab slave trade was propagated for over 1,300 years. The people were taken and put into slavery all throughout the land, and they were forced to serve Islam. That's what the Bible is talking about, where it said there you would serve other gods. Let's read on now. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 28, and we're going to read verse 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. God is telling you that the people, the Afro-Iraqis, the Israelites, They would be impoverished. They would not have good jobs. They would not have good economics. They would be on the bottom of society. Now let's read verse 65. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. Now let's jump over to this article. In Iraq's African enclave, color is plainly seen. Let's read this one section real quick. And it reads, black people here are living in fear, said Jalal Diab Tajil, an advocate for the country's estimated 1.2 million African Iraqis. We want to end them. God said that you would have a trembling heart. And the reason you have a trembling heart is because you do not keep God's commandments. He has kept you in that fear. So when we look at the Bible, it shows you that the people will be in poverty. The salt and the sugar that you all worked to farm, to mine, you all have reaped no benefit from it. The people that have came and conquered you, the Arabs, they have gotten above you very high. Let's jump to this article now. In Basra, a southern oil and port city with winds that constantly whip the desert sands, car washing is not a bad way to survive. And over time, the field has become a crowded gathering point for boys and men waiting with hoses and buckets for the next dirty car. The children, most no older than 14, are school dropouts. Sometimes it was their choice, other times the decision rested with a father who had little formal education himself and an unsteady income. So when we read this article, we see that oppression and poverty has gone from generation to generation. And the Bible said that the Afro-Iraqis would only be oppressed. They would only be in poverty. It says that the people would get up above them very high and they would come down very low. That they would lend to them and they would not lend to the people that oppressed them. And that is why the Afro-Iraqis find themselves washing cars and in poverty in Basra. Why has this continued to be the oppressive state of the people? Let's read verse 46 and find out why this continues. Verse 46, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. The curses that we read about in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, will be upon the Afro-Iraqis forever until they repent and come back to keeping God's commandments. Remember, God did this because we went away and we served idols. We served other gods. We did things that were counterproductive to serving the God of the Bible. And now, in order to get the salvation we want, in order to be freed, and in order to not live in fear and on the bottom, we must come back to keeping God's commandments. And when we do, let's read Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 13 and see what God will do for the Afro-Iraqi, for the Israelites that have been prophesied about in this Bible. Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 13. And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandment of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day to observe and to do them. If the Afro-Iraqi man and woman come back to keeping God's commandments, they will be above. There will be no more poverty for the Afro-Iraqi. They will be saved in the last days. Let's read Isaiah 11:11 and let's see what God has planned for the Afro-Iraqi man, because he is coming back to save those individuals that repent and come back to being the Israelites. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. The Lord is going to gather his people again from Shinar. Shinar refers to modern day Iraq. So remember, God is coming back for you Israelites, for the people that call themselves the Afro-Iraqis. But they must repent and come back to keeping God's laws, statutes, and commandments. You can find out more on how to keep God's laws, statutes, and commandments by visiting IsraelUnite.org. Learn the laws, learn who you are, and come back to keeping God's laws, statutes, and commandments.